The Shield and The Wire are two of, in my opinion, the greatest shows of all time. Both are in the cop show genre, and in this video I want to see which is better, and why. Now this does seem like an unfair comparison, and I do think it's closer than people who believe. I will be giving points to each show for the protagonist, the antagonist, writing, each show's best season, and each show's finale. First up, the protagonist. Let's start with The Shield. Vic Mackey is one of TV's greatest protagonists. The performance by Michael Chiklis was so great he won an Emmy for it. And in the show's first season, which is nowhere near its best, throughout the first episode we see Vic as a cop that doesn't follow the rules. Whether it's beating up the pedo or humiliating the guy in purple in the first scene. But he still gets the job done. But at the end of the pilot we see a darker side to Vic. This continues perfectly throughout the entire series, as Vic becomes even more irredeemable and even more complex and well written. And come the final two episodes, Vic loses everything. And his confession scene, and the final scene I'll talk about later, are some of the greatest acting ever put to the silver screen. Next, The Wire. This is a very unfair comparison, because the entire city of Baltimore is seen as the main character of The Wire. And the depth the writers go into, it's a very compelling main character. But if there was to be one main character, or the closest thing to it, it is McNulty, who is a very controversial figure in the Wire fanbase. But I think he's a great character, and I think he's one of the show's best arcs, going from an annoying self-righteous cop to a cop who establishes a real relationship with the criminals, i.e. Bodhi, to going back to how he was in the first season, but breaking the rules even more, setting up a fake serial killer in order to gain funding to arrest Marlowe and his gang, to at the end becoming the everyman and settling down. I think Dominic West's performance as McNulty was great as well, as his character writing, but I think Vic Mackey is just more compelling and an interesting character to watch, and even if I like McNulty, there are a lot of fans who didn't. 1-0 to The Shield. Next is Antagonist. Now I think The Shield basically gets destroyed, but I'll try to somewhat make an argument, even if it's a very weak one. The Shield's villains vary from mediocre to good, but in my opinion, apart from one person, never hit that great level, like The Wire does. Season 1 main villain is Terry, who has a weird backstory, as they killed him due to not thinking they would get picked up for another season. Season 2's main villain, Armadillo, was quite menacing, but due to the actor getting another job, they killed him quick. Season 3's villain was very creepy but unremarkable. But the show's best three antagonists were Antoine Mitchell, who was a great and terrifying villain, and showed Anthony Anderson's more dramatic side, but he was dragged down due to season 4 being a forgettable season. Shane Vendrell, who is one of the show's most tragic and detestable characters, who due to Walton Goggins' performance makes the character somewhat sympathetic, and of course the show's best antagonist, Kavanagh, who despite being in the right, was in no way likeable as a character, and the fact Forrest Whitaker lost weight playing the role adds a subtle brilliance to his performance. But one of The Wire's strongest points are its antagonists, where that's the fantastic scheming Stringer Bell, which launched Idris Elba's career, or the terrifying psychopathic heartless Marlowe, to the soldiers of Chris and Snoop. The Wire has fantastic villains, and I've got a video on my channel about the villains. And I've also got a video about the fact that I think The Wire has TV's greatest villain, that being Marlowe Stanfield. Score 1-1. Next is writing. This in my opinion is the most unfair category, as despite evolving and loving The Shield, The Wire's strongest point is its writing. Take this quote from David Simon. Quote, "TV is not journalism. It doesn't have the rigour of journalism. It doesn't have the proof positive that facts provide. So it can be readily dismissed as mere propaganda. But it can certainly reach more people." End quote. Which is a perfect quote to describe The Wire. It's trying to be almost like a documentary, not a piece of art. But as acknowledged by David Simon, it's not as good as journalism. The reason The Wire is so good is mainly due to its writing. I'm not trying to discredit the cast, but the writing is so layered and deep, and of course, all the pieces matter. David Simon was a police reporter for the Baltimore Sun from 1982 to 1995, giving the show its sense of realism. And the other head writer, Ed Burns, worked as a police officer for over 20 years, and as a teacher after that. Both of them pulled characters and plot elements from real life, which heightened the show's writing. While The Shields had fantastic writing, The Wire is, in my opinion, the most well thought out and written show of all time. 2-1 to The Wire. Next is each show's best season, that being Season 5 of The Shield and Season 4 of The Wire. This is a tough one, both seasons are fantastic. The Shield Season 5 is the show's most consistent, well thought out season, as it follows Vic and Kavanagh in their game of cat and mouse to try and catch each other. Whether it's Kavanagh getting information from Vic's wife, Vic sleeping with Kavanagh's mentally ill wife, and the season features some great moments, like the arrest of Lem, the show's most sympathetic character, Aceveda being a double agent, and in one of the show's finest episodes, the tragic demise of Lem, which sets in motion the downfall and the eventual end of the strike team. And we see after Shane does have an emotional reaction, from which is of course heightened by Goggins' performance, even after doing this, making him still sympathetic. The season is consistent, and due to the small episode count, 11 episodes in total, allows there to be more focus on specific plot lines, like the Kavanagh story, which is one of the greatest cat and mouse games in TV history. Now to Season 4 of The Wire, which if there is a great season of TV, it's this, in my opinion. Its main focus is on the Baltimore school system, focusing on a young group of 4 boys, and their interaction with the coroner. Randy being responsible for little Kevin's death, and the interactions with their teacher Prez, who throughout the season develops from an unlikable character to one of the most understanding, and is able to have an almost father-son relationship with Daquan, a son of drug users. Namond, whose dad is Weebay Price, who remains in prison, and Michael, who has garnered the interest of Snoop, Chris and Marlo, who tried to bring Michael into their organisation. The season also follows Cutty, bringing those said boys to his boxing, where Michael Cutty thinks has potential. Also during the season, Marlo's card game is robbed by Omar, setting up their game of trying to find and kill each other. All these plotlines add to make this season great, and the season finale even greater. McNulty, who seems to have sorted out his problems, is a normal police street officer who now knows the name of most of Bodie's coroner and is barely in the season due to Dominic West getting homesick. But he is in the finale. McNulty ends up taking Bodie out for lunch, but Bodie is spotted by people, making him look like a snitch, which leads to Bodie getting killed by Marlo's people. When McNulty hears this, it was inadvertently his fault. He goes livid and returns to his old, unlikable, bitter self. This is a perfect build-up and payoff, and is the show's best season by far. There are many other plot lines I missed, like the Bubbles dealing with the loss of Sherrod, Lester raiding Holmes, but essentially the season is complex and connects in such a genius way and leaves you satisfied and wanting more. 3-1 The Wire. And finally the finale of both shows. First up The Shield, which has a perfect finale, especially for its specific plot. Essentially, Vic loses everything in this finale. His family goes into witness protection, his best friend Shane kills himself and his family. Vic gains immunity, but in the process we get a heartbreaking scene of Ronnie getting arrested, showing David Sneal's incredible acting that was underutilised throughout the show. Aceveda essentially becoming the complete opposite of what he was at the start, a corrupt businessman and mayor candidate, who was opposed by Robert Hudgens, Andre 3K, while only appearing in 2 episodes, was a memorable character, and in this episode a very tragic one, who parallels Aceveda at the start of the show, and foreshadowing the fact he now will become a good police officer. Dutch by the end still not finding the serial killer, which emphasises the fact that despite the show ending, these characters will still have to go on with their normal lives, and the final scene being terrific. Vic now working as a normal office job, unable to return to work, and the look on Vic's face as to the realisation as to what he's done is perfect. And great work from Michael Chiklis, showing the array of emotions and the almost complete emptiness that Vic now feels. And by the end we see Vic walk off the frame, never to be seen again. All in all, a perfect way to end the show and one of TV's greatest finales. The Wire also had a great ending, but a rocky road getting there. Season 5 of The Wire was weird. Some criticise it for the show, known for its realism, main plotline being seemingly unrealistic. Essentially, McNulty creates a fake serial killer in order to gain funding to take down the Stanford organisation. Through the season, it focuses on the newspaper business and has some highs and lows. I think Omar's ultimate demise, while anticlimactic, was very fitting. But the season having to follow up season 4 was a very hard task, but pulls it off in a great finale. Carcetti is informed of the fake serial killer hoax, and McNulty identifies a mentally ill homeless man as a killer, due to essentially being forced to by the higher-ups. Carcetti takes credit for the arrests of the serial killer, and the arrests of the Stanford organisation. McNulty is forced to then retire. Also, Daniels is promoted to commissioner but is blackmailed into resigning. Cheese is killed by Slim Charles. Dookie becomes a drug addict. Michael becomes the new Omar. Bubbles has a meal with his sister. Kennard is arrested. Marlowe becomes like his main rival Stringer, and many more characters are seen, and I mean it a lot. But McNulty locates Larry, looks over the city. Those things I said are included in a montage before it cuts to various scenes from the show. Before McNulty says,
"Let's go home."
And they drive back to Baltimore, the show closing on a shot of the city. In my opinion, a very good finale, but I think for its specific show, The Shield has the best ending it could have. So it's 3-2 The Wire. So, in conclusion, both are incredible shows, and two of the best in the cop genre, but I do think The Wire edges it. It's close, but I do believe The Wire is a better show. But you should check out both.